Lesson 12, microeconomics. I'm probably looking a bit windswept at this moment in time. I've just been out in the surf at Sizewell off the Suffolk coast. Anyway, lesson 12, microeconomics. I'm just going to talk to you about the meaning of market failure. Market failure means that there has been or there is a misallocation of resources. That's a textbook definition. So why does that occur? It can occur for all sorts of reasons. What it's really saying is that the price mechanism does not lead to the optimum allocation of resources. It's really, really good, but it doesn't produce the best outcome. Okay, now one reason for this is because of something in economics we call negative externalities. A negative externality is if you buy a pack of cigarettes, the cost to you is the private cost of you buying those cigarettes. But on top of that, there's a negative externality, and that cost is to a third party. The third party in this case could be passive smokers who breathe in your smoke, although it's harder these days. The other one is the extra cost to the NHS in terms of treating you when you become ill. So social cost is equal to private cost plus a negative externality. Now, if there isn't a negative externality on a good, so say if you go out and buy some humus or something like that, there is no negative externality, so therefore the social cost will be equal to the private cost. So the cost is the cost that you pay. Another cost is a positive externality, and here, if there's a positive externality, this is a positive effect on a third party. So if you happen to go to university and get a better education, there is a private benefit to you personally, is that hopefully at the end of the day you'll be able to get a better job which pays more money, assuming of course that money makes you happier, which it may not do. And the positive externality is the benefit to a third party. The third party in this case is if you become more educated, then you're going to add more to the economy, pushing out the AS curve or whatever, so therefore everybody gains from that. Now the free market doesn't take that into account, really. So when we show a positive externality, right, when we normally draw a demand curve, that shows the marginal private benefit. That is the benefit to you, not to anyone else. But on top of that, there may well be a social benefit to a third party. So call that D dash, and that is marginal social benefit. And in this case, the difference between the two is the benefit to a third party. So a price mechanism is good at allocating resources, but never takes into account negative externalities or positive externalities. Now there can be what we say complete market failure, and that is when there is a missing market, and that is why we have to have public goods. Now a public good is something like defence, because there is no point in creating your own army, and if you did create your own army to defend the UK, you would also be defending every other citizen in the UK, but they wouldn't be paying for it. So there would be a free rider problem there. So some goods, there is no market. So it has to be provided by the government sector or the public sector. And in that case is a public good. Right, a partial market failure is something where there is a market exists. So if we didn't have any education system or an NHS in the country, there would still be a market for those goods. The point is though, there may only be a partial market, and not everybody may send their kids to school. Therefore, if people don't send their kids to school, there are no positive externalities of that. So we call that partial market failure. A public good, things like defence I've just spoken about, and we say the market is missing. There is no market for that good. Or they always use the example of street lights or a lighthouse. A positive externality is a merit good, things like education or health, because it'd be a benefit to a third party, as I've just outlined. A negative externality, which I haven't written down on here, is called a demerit good. And a monopoly, when there's just one firm, that could be classified as market failure as well, because they're faced with an inelastic demand curve. Can you remember doing this previously? And if you're faced with an inelastic demand curve, what are you going to do? You're going to raise your price. So in this case, you can raise the price from P to P dash, and demand smalls by a much smaller amount. So this is when, so there will be market failure there, because a monopoly can charge very, very high prices for its good, because it's the only one in the market. So therefore, the government must intervene. And lastly, inequalities of income and wealth. So if you don't get a lot of income, then you have less votes in a price mechanism, free market type system. So that also will then lead to market failure, because you can't buy the goods that are needed to have a reasonable standard of living. So all of these things are failures of the market system. So therefore, the government must intervene. So what we have really, in reality, we have the market system, or the price mechanism, which is a rationing function, incentive function, and signalling function. All right? It's not perfect, it's pretty good. So there is market failure. And then because there is market failure, the governments will then intervene. And hopefully the government will intervene and make things better. But if it doesn't, then that is government failure. So you find a lot of essays, particularly on the S course, which are to do with the price mechanism, pretty good at allocating resources. But there'll be market failure, therefore the government intervenes, and if they get it wrong, there is going to be government failure on there. Okay? So this is a brief introduction to market failure, and what we do in the next sessions is we look at the individual components of that on there. Thank you.